Olivia Hart was never the favorite daughter. Adopted, an artist, always falling short in a family that praised her sister, the successful lawyer, the pride of their parents. Years of swallowed words, polite smiles, and hidden scars. Until one night, while packing to uncover her origins, her sister walks into the room and says, "It's $1,500 for the trip. You can't afford it." Olivia simply smiles, but behind that smile lies more than pride. It hides a truth on the edge of revelation. Because on the edge of the bed rests an envelope, sealed, silent. And inside, not just money. A missing piece, a sign, perhaps a link to Olivia's real family. A reminder that sometimes faith comes from the most unexpected places, and that the story they told about you may never have been the truth. Want to know what was inside the envelope and how it changed everything? Follow Olivia's journey of identity, family, and long-buried secrets. Subscribe now for more emotional twists and powerful storytelling. Chapter 1. Invisible Threads. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds of Emma Hart's apartment, casting golden stripes across her half-packed suitcase. Her fiery red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, with several stubborn strands escaping to frame her face. At 42, the subtle lines around her eyes told stories of both laughter and disappointment, more of the latter in recent years. Emma carefully folded a worn sketchbook into the suitcase. Its pages contained fragments of her journey as an artist, dreams that her adopted family had always regarded with thinly veiled disappointment. She ran her fingers over the leather cover, remembering how her father had sighed when she denounced her art school plans instead of following her sister Catherine into law school. "Just once," she whispered to herself. "I'd like them to look at me the way they look at her." The doorbell's chime interrupted her thoughts. Emma glanced at her watch. Catherine was early, as usual. Perfect timing had always been one of her sister's many celebrated virtues. Emma opened the door to find Catherine standing there in an impeccable charcoal pantsuit, her blonde hair cut in a precise bob that framed her confident smile. At 45, Catherine Hart was everything Emma wasn't: organized, conventionally successful, and their parents' undisputed favorite. "You're not ready yet," Catherine observed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes darted around the apartment, taking inventory of Emma's bohemian decor with the same clinical assessment she likely used when evaluating legal briefs. "Hello to you too, Kat," Emma replied, closing the door. "I'm almost packed." Catherine moved to the kitchen counter, setting down her designer handbag. "Mom and Dad are worried about this trip, Emma. They think you're being impulsive. Again." Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm 42 years old. I don't need their approval to search for my birth parents." "Nobody's saying you do," Catherine replied, her tone softening slightly. "But flying across the country on a hunch, based on some adoption agency paperwork you found in the attic, that's hardly a solid plan." Emma returned to her suitcase, carefully placing a framed photograph inside, one of the few pictures where she looked genuinely happy, painting on a beach at sunset. "It's more than a hunch. The document had a name and a location. It's the first real lead I've ever had." Catherine sighed, following Emma to the bedroom. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "It's $1,500 for the trip, Emma. You can't afford it." Emma smiled, then saw the envelope. It was cream-colored, resting on the edge of her bed where she'd left it earlier. Inside was not just the money she'd saved over 18 months of extra illustration commissions and weekend art classes, but also the letter that had arrived 3 weeks ago, the letter that had changed everything. "Actually," Emma said quietly, picking up the envelope, "I can." Catherine's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Since when do you have that kind of money? Last I checked, greeting card illustrations and community college art classes weren't exactly lucrative." Emma held the envelope, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Catherine." "Like what?" Emma hesitated. The letter inside the envelope had arrived unexpectedly, a response to the DNA test she'd taken months earlier. A match. A woman named Judith Coleman from Seattle, possibly her birth mother. "I've been saving," she said instead, "and this trip matters to me." Catherine's expression softened unexpectedly. "Emma, I know we don't always see eye to eye, but I'm worried about you getting hurt. What if you go all the way there and it's a dead end? Or worse, what if she finds her and she doesn't want to know you?" The question hung in the air between them, the fear Emma had been carrying since the letter arrived. "Then, at least I'll know," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've lived my whole life feeling like I'm missing a piece, like I'm trying to finish a painting without knowing what it's supposed to look like." She tucked a strand of copper hair behind her ear, a gesture she'd made since childhood whenever gathering courage. "I need to do this, Kat, not just to find her, but to find me." Catherine studied her sister's face, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. She seemed to notice the determination in Emma's green eyes, the quiet strength that had always been there beneath the artistic temperament their parents had so often dismissed. "You've already made contact with her, haven't you?" Catherine asked quietly. Emma nodded. "She wants to meet me." Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She crossed the room and took Emma's hands in hers. "Then I'll drive you to the airport tomorrow." Emma blinked in surprise. "You will?" "Yes," Catherine said. "And I'll tell Mom and Dad after you're already in the air, so they can't try to talk you out of it." For a moment, Emma saw a glimpse of the sister she'd rarely known, an ally rather than a rival. "Thank you," Emma whispered. Catherine squeezed her hands. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Call me if you need anything, even if it's just to talk." Emma nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I will." As the sister stood there in the fading afternoon light, Emma realized that perhaps the journey she was about to take might bridge more than one kind of gap in her life. If this story of family secrets and self-discovery has captured your attention, don't miss what happens when Emma finally meets the woman who might be her birth mother. Subscribe to our channel now to be notified when Chapter 2 arrives, and join a community of viewers who appreciate stories that touch the heart and soul. Remember, sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that lead us back to ourselves. Chapter 2. The Color of Truth. Seattle greeted Emma with sheets of gentle rain that transformed the city into a watercolor painting. From the taxi window, the Space Needle punctured a canvas of pewter clouds, while the waters of Puget Sound rippled like brushstrokes against the shoreline. To an artist's eye, the city seemed to be rendered in shades of blue and gray, so different from the sun-baked palette of her home in Arizona. "First time in Seattle?" the taxi driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Emma nodded, her fingers nervously playing with the pendant around her neck, a small silver palette that Catherine had unexpectedly pressed into her hand at the airport. "For luck," her sister had said. "Beautiful city," the driver continued, "especially when the rain clears and you can see the mountains." "I'm sure it is," Emma replied, her attention drawn to the address on her phone. Judith Coleman lived in a neighborhood called Queen Anne, in a blue Victorian house with a view of the city. At least, That's what Emma had learned from their brief email exchanges. Exchanges that had been polite but guarded on both sides. The taxi climbed the steep hills of Queen Anne, passing rows of elegant homes with carefully tended gardens. Emma's heart pounded harder with each block. What would Judith be like? Would Emma see her own features reflected in the older woman's face? Would there be an instant connection or awkward silence? "This is it," the driver announced, pulling up to a blue Victorian with white trim. A small garden of rain-drenched roses lined the front walkway. Emma paid the fare with trembling hands and stepped out into the light drizzle. Standing on the sidewalk with her suitcase, she felt suddenly, overwhelmingly unprepared. Perhaps Catherine had been right about the impulsiveness of this journey. Before she could reconsider, the front door opened. A woman in her mid-60s stood in the doorway. She had elegant silver hair cut in a stylish bob and was dressed in a simple gray sweater and black pants. But what caught Emma's breath was the unmistakable shade of her eyes, the same vivid green as Emma's own. "Emma?" she called, her voice carrying a slight tremor. Emma nodded, unable to speak. Judith Coleman descended the steps slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might flee. When she reached Emma, she stopped, keeping a respectful distance. "You have your father's hair," she said softly. "I always wondered if you would." Something broke loose inside Emma's chest, a dam of emotions held back for 42 years. "You knew my father?" Judith nodded, her eyes glistening. "I knew him very well. Please, come inside. The rain is getting heavier." Inside, the house was warm and filled with art. Paintings covered nearly every wall, and small sculptures adorned shelves and tables. Emma's artist eye recognized quality and passion in the collection. "You like art," Emma observed, removing her rain-dampened jacket. "I'm an art professor at the university," Judith replied with a small smile. "Retired now, but I still teach a few classes." Emma's heart skipped. All her life, she'd wondered where her artistic talents had come from, in a family that valued pragmatism over creativity. "Would you like some tea?" Judith asked, leading her into a kitchen painted a warm yellow. "Yes, please," Emma replied, taking a seat at a round oak table. From her purse, she withdrew the envelope. Not the envelope containing her savings, but another one, holding the letter from Judith and a faded photograph she'd found among her adoptive parents' papers. Judith placed a steaming mug of tea in front of Emma, then sat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke, both studying the other's face with quiet intensity. "I have so many questions," Emma finally said. "I'm sure you do. I've been preparing for them since your email arrived. But first, I want you to know something." She reached across the table, not quite touching Emma's hand. "Giving you up was the hardest thing I've ever done, and not a single day has passed that I haven't thought of you." Emma swallowed hard. "Why did you do it?" Judith's eyes clouded with old pain. "I was 23, in graduate school for art history. Your father was my professor, married, with children of his own." I sighed. "When I told him I was pregnant, he ended things immediately, offered money for an abortion. When I refused, he made it clear I was on my own." "So you gave me up," Emma said, working to keep accusation from her voice. "I was alone, with no family support and a career just beginning. I thought you deserved better than what I could give you then." Judith's voice broke slightly. "I was told you were placed with a good family. Lawyers, I believe." "My father is a corporate attorney. My mother was his legal secretary before they married. My sister followed in his footsteps." "And you?" Emma smiled faintly. I broke the pattern. I'm an artist. Illustrations mostly, some painting. Something like joy flickered across Judith's face. May I see your work sometime? I brought my portfolio, I admitted. I wasn't sure why, but it felt important. Judith smiled fully for the first time, revealing laugh lines that softened her elegant features. I'd love to see it. As they sipped their tea, the initial tension began to dissolve. Emma learned that Judith had never married or had other children, pouring her life instead into her art and her students. She'd tracked Emma discreetly over the years through the adoption agency, but had respected the closed adoption terms. When your DNA test matched with mine, I was shocked. I never expected you'd be looking for me. I've been looking my whole life, even when I didn't know what I was looking for. Judith rose and walked to a cabinet, returning with a wooden box. I've kept these for you, she said, opening it to reveal dozens of small wrapped packages, one for every birthday. I couldn't send them, but I couldn't not acknowledge the day either. Emma's hands trembled as she picked up the package marked First Birthday. Unwrapping it revealed a tiny silver charm in the shape of a paintbrush. I bought the first one on impulse, Judith explained. After that, it became a tradition. One every year, even though I had no way to give them to you. Emma unwrapped the second package, a tiny palette to match the brush. The third was a small canvas. One by one, they told the story of a mother's love expressed in the language of art. I have something else to show you, Judith said, leading Emma to what was clearly her studio at the back of the house. Large windows overlooked a lush garden, and canvases in various stages of completion stood on easels. But what drew Emma's eye was a large painting hanging on the far wall, a portrait of a young woman with fiery red hair, her face turned slightly away, standing on a beach at sunset. You painted me, Emma whispered. Many times, in many ways, Judith admitted, always imagining what you might look like as you grew. This one I did about 5 years ago. Emma moved closer to the painting, recognizing elements of her own style in Judith's brushwork. The kinship of artistic DNA revealed itself in the way they both captured light and emotion. I have a photograph, Emma said suddenly. From the beach in California. It's almost exactly like this. Judith's eyes widened. Show me. Emma retrieved the framed photograph from her suitcase, the one she'd packed earlier, showing her painting on a beach at sunset. The similarities between the real photograph and Judith's imagined painting were uncanny. How is this possible? Emma asked. Judith touched the photograph with gentle fingers. Perhaps art connects us in ways beyond blood or memory. Perhaps some bonds can't be broken, even by time or distance. As evening settled over Seattle, the two women sat in the studio sharing stories of Emma's childhood, of Judith's career, of the parallel lives they'd lived. There were tears, but also unexpected laughter, and with each passing hour, Emma felt something shifting inside her, a lifetime of feeling out of place, gradually giving way to a sense of recognition. Would you like to see your father's work? Judith asked suddenly. Emma stilled. My father was an artist too? Judith nodded. Robert Mercer. He was quite well known in certain circles before he died 10 years ago. Mercer, Emma repeated. I've studied his work. His use of color was revolutionary. Yes, Judith said softly. And you have his hands, the same long fingers, perfect for holding a brush. Emma looked down at her hands, the hands that had always been different from her adoptive family's, the hands that had found their purpose in art despite lack of encouragement. Tomorrow, if you'd like, I can take you to the University Gallery. They have a permanent collection of his work. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. As night fell over Seattle, the rain finally stopped. The clouds parted to reveal a sky scattered with stars, and the distant silhouettes of mountains emerged from the darkness. Judith showed Emma to the guest room, a space that somehow felt both new and familiar, with its walls painted the exact shade of blue that Emma had always been drawn to. I hope you'll stay for a while, Judith said at the doorway. There's so much more to share. I'd like that, Emma replied. After Judith bid her goodnight, Emma sat on the edge of the bed and opened her phone. She had a text from Catherine. Did you meet her? Are you okay? For a moment, Emma stared at the message, surprised by her sister's concern. Then she typed back, Yes, and for the first time in my life, I think I might be exactly where I belong. As she set the phone down, Emma realized that the journey she'd begun hadn't led her away from family. It had expanded her understanding of what family could be. Chapter 3. The Bridge Between Worlds. 3 days in Seattle had transformed Emma in ways she couldn't fully articulate. Morning light streamed through the guest room window as she packed her sketchbook, now filled with drawings of Judith's garden, the Seattle skyline, and several studies of Judith's hands as they worked with clay in her small pottery studio behind the house. Yesterday's visit to the University Gallery had been revelatory. Standing before her biological father's paintings, Emma had experienced a profound sense of recognition. Robert Mercer's bold use of color, his distinctive brushstrokes, they mirrored techniques Emma had naturally developed on her own. Artistic DNA, passed down without a single lesson. Are you sure you need to leave tomorrow? Judith asked from the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Emma accepted a mug gratefully. I wish I could stay longer, but I have a commission deadline next week, and... She hesitated. I need to talk to my parents. Judith nodded, understanding shadowing her green eyes, the same eyes that had startled Emma each time she caught the reflection in mirrors around the house. Will you tell them about meeting me? Emma sipped her coffee, considering. Yes, it's time for some honesty in our family. They moved to the kitchen, where morning sunlight illuminated a small canvas on the easel by the window, a collaborative piece they'd begun the previous evening. Judith had started with the background, a Seattle skyline at dusk, and Emma had added foreground figures, 2 women of different generations, standing side by side at an easel. We should finish it before you go, Judith suggested, her voice carrying a note of carefully restrained hope. Emma smiled. I'd like that. As they worked on the painting together, brushes moving in comfortable silence, Emma's phone chimed with a text message. Catherine again. Flight still on schedule for tomorrow? Need me to pick you up? The offer surprised Emma. Since their moment of connection before Emma's departure, Catherine had checked in daily, brief messages that revealed genuine concern beneath her usually businesslike exterior. Your sister? Judith asked, noticing Emma's expression. Yes, Emma replied, texting back a quick confirmation. She's been unexpectedly supportive about this trip. Judith added a touch of gold to the horizon line of their painting. "Tell me more about her." Emma described Catherine, the perfect daughter, the successful lawyer, the parental favorite, but as she spoke, she found herself including details she'd rarely acknowledged: Catherine's dry humor, her unfailing reliability, the way she'd defended Emma from playground bullies when they were children. "She sounds like she cares about you a great deal," Judith observed. "I suppose she does, in her own way." Sometimes, the people closest to us are the hardest to see clearly. We get locked into old patterns, old perceptions. Emma thought about this as they finished the painting, adding final touches that blended their distinct styles into something wholly new. By early afternoon, the piece was complete, a visual testament to a connection that transcended their years apart. "It's beautiful," Judith said. Softly, "It's true," Emma replied. That evening, they sat on Judith's porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues that reminded Emma of her father's, of Robert's work. The thought no longer brought pain, only a quiet wonder at how life could contain such perfect circles. "I have something for you," Judith said, handing Emma a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside was a silver charm bracelet with 42 tiny charms already attached, all the birthday gifts Judith had saved, now united on a single chain. "Oh," Emma breathed, tears welling. "It's perfect." Judith helped her fasten it around her wrist. "There's room for more, if you'll let me add to it each year." "I'd like that very much," Emma replied. As evening deepened into night, they talked about the future, about Emma returning for a longer visit, about Judith coming to Arizona, about a possible joint exhibition of their work. "There's something I need to ask you," Emma said finally, voicing the question that had lingered since her arrival. "Do you regret giving me up?" Judith was quiet for a long moment, her fingers gently tracing the outline of a rose petal that had fallen onto the porch swing. "I regret the circumstances that made it necessary. I regret not being brave enough to find a way to keep you. But when I see the woman you've become, accomplished, compassionate, true to yourself despite pressures to be otherwise, I can't regret the life you've had." She turned to Emma, her expression earnest. "What I regret most is that you ever felt unwanted or unloved, because you've been deeply loved every day of your life, even when I couldn't show it." The words settled into her heart, filling spaces that had been empty for too long. The next morning arrived too quickly. Standing at the departures terminal with her suitcase and a carefully packaged canvas, their collaborative painting, which Judith had insisted she take, Emma found herself reluctant to say goodbye. "This isn't an ending," Judith reminded her, enfolding Emma in a hug that felt like coming home. "It's a beginning." Emma nodded against Judith's shoulder, inhaling the scent of oil paint and jasmine that she would forever associate with this newfound connection. "I'll call when I land. And I'll be here, always." The flight back to Arizona gave Emma time to reflect. She touched the charm bracelet on her wrist, each tiny symbol representing a year of silent love. She thought about the envelope that had started this journey, how something so simple had become the key to unlocking her past and perhaps her future. Catherine was waiting at the airport, standing tall in the crowd with her perfect posture and watchful eyes. When she spotted Emma, something unexpected happened. Her composed expression melted into a genuine smile. "Welcome home," Catherine said, taking Emma's suitcase. "You look different." "I feel different," Emma admitted as they walked to the parking garage. In the car, Catherine glanced at the wrapped canvas on the back seat. New work? A collaboration, Emma explained, with Judith. Catherine nodded, her eyes on the road. I told Mom and Dad you were coming back today. They want to see you. Emma tensed. What did they say when you told them where I was? Dad was angry at first. Mom cried. Catherine's hands tightened on the steering wheel. But then something strange happened. They started talking about when they first got you. How tiny you were. How your red hair stood out like a flame. She paused at a stoplight, turning to look at Emma. I've never heard Dad talk like that before. Like he was remembering something precious. Emma blinked in surprise. Really? Really? The light changed and Catherine continued driving. I think they're ready to listen now, if you're ready to talk. Emma considered this, fingering the charm bracelet. I am. About everything. Everything? My art? My adoption? Finding Judith? The fact that I've never felt like I belonged in our family. Emma took a deep breath. And how much I've always wanted to. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the console and briefly squeezed Emma's hand. For what it's worth, I've always been proud to be your sister, even when I was terrible at showing it. The admission hung in the car between them, another bridge being built, another gap closing. As they approached their parents' neighborhood, Emma thought about the many threads that had woven together to create her life, the family that had raised her with all their flaws and expectations, the mother who had loved her from afar, the artistic legacy that had flowed in her veins despite everything, and now the possibility of bringing these separate worlds together. They're not perfect, Catherine said suddenly, as if reading Emma's thoughts. Mom and Dad, they made mistakes with both of us. Both of us? Emma echoed, surprised. Catherine nodded. They pushed me so hard to be what Dad wanted that I never figured out what I wanted. At least you had the courage to follow your own path. The admission revealed a vulnerability in Catherine that Emma had never recognized before, a different kind of loneliness, a different kind of struggle. Maybe we can both find better paths forward, Emma suggested softly. I'd like that, Catherine replied. As they pulled into their parents' driveway, Emma felt a strange sense of peace. The journey she had begun with an envelope and a question had brought her not to a single answer, but to a constellation of truths. That family could be both born and made, that love could exist across time and distance, that it was never too late to bridge the gaps between worlds. Inside her purse was a small package from Judith, a gift for Emma's adoptive parents. Inside was a note that read simply, "Thank you for giving her what I couldn't. She is the masterpiece of both our lives." Emma stepped out of the car, the setting sun catching the copper highlights in her hair, her father's hair. The charm bracelet jingled softly against her wrist as she reached for her sister's hand. Together, they walked toward the front door, toward the difficult conversations and new beginnings that waited on the other side, toward the future that Emma now knew held room for all the pieces of herself. Some journeys end exactly where they begin, but the traveler returns transformed. Emma Hart, artist, daughter, sister, had finally found the missing colors in her palette, and with them, she could at last complete the portrait of her life. As Emma's story comes to its emotional conclusion, we're reminded that family is more than blood. It's about connections that transcend time and circumstances. If this journey of self-discovery and reconciliation has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of human experience. Your subscription not only supports our storytelling, but joins you with a community of viewers who understand that the most powerful narratives are the ones that mirror our own search for belonging. Remember, sometimes the greatest discoveries happen when we have the courage to open unexpected envelopes.